Okay, good morning. We are in the middle of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, chapter 299, Reish Zadik Tes. And we're going through the various different details of the halachas regarding the fact that one is to stop eating when Shabbos is over and thus the person is required in Havdalah. And we discussed that if the person began their eating at a time when it's permissible, before Ben Hashmashas, before sunset, then they may continue their meal. And yesterday we described that if someone decides to make Havdalah in the middle of their meal, so it doesn't end the meal, but it ends Shabbos. And therefore, because the meal continues, one opinion states there's no reason to make the bracha over the cup of wine upon which you're making Havdalah. You just hold the cup of wine, make the Havdalah without actually making the actual blessing, because that bracha was covered by the wine that you drank in your meal, assuming you drank wine during that meal. If you're drinking it on beer, then certainly it's covered if you washed or if you made shakal. Another view says, no. The very fact that Havdalah is an independent action means it requires its own bracha on the actual liquid. And therefore, best case scenario, avoid making Havdalah until you've ended your meal, which is benching. If it so happens that you want to, okay, so then you follow the first opinion, which is to skip the bracha, hagafen. It so happens that you want to break Shabbos without breaking your meal. This is where we left off yesterday.
This kind of reminds the idea not to combine mitzvah.
That's going to come up soon, but maybe tangentially. Maybe there's some
combining the mitzvah of making a bracha before eating the mitzvah of Havdalah.
Usually you do combine that, right? In other words, there's a mitzvah to make Havdalah, and our sages ordained, as we'll learn in the Gemara later, that when you declare Shabbos or Yom Tov, you should do so over a cup of wine. So there you're supposed to combine, but they're not mitzvahs necessarily. In other words, the mitzvah over the cup of wine is not a bracha mitzvah. It's a mitzvah over doing a cup of wine. The mitzvah of Havdalah, the bracha of Havdalah is the bracha over the mitzvah, the bracha over Shabbos, right?
I still have trouble understanding why, if Havdalah is a separate thing altogether, then you should say the bracha.
That's the other opinion. So I just touched on something. Let me explain this again, make this clearer. There are two categories.
This is not fine. We're still in the middle of it.
No, actually, this part is final. We finalize this detail. So let's make this clear. There are different categories of brachas, right? Some blessings are praise, some are thanks, some are requests, right? Now, in the brachas of thanks, you have two categories, at least just for the purposes of this discussion. You have what's called mitzvahs, where you're thanking Hashem for a mitzvah. And then you have what's called birchas hanenin, which is the bracha over enjoying something. Nehenin means to enjoy. And you don't enjoy of anything in God's world without first thanking God for it. So there's thanking Hashem for a mitzvah, and there's thanking Hashem for enjoying. When you're making a bracha hagafen on your Havdalah, which bracha is that? Is that a bracha over a mitzvah, or is that a bracha over enjoying?
It's bracha over a mitzvah, I think.
So there's the misunderstanding. It's a bracha over enjoying, because you're drinking a cup of wine. That's why you're making a hagafen. You're making a bracha over enjoying the wine. Now, you're also, while you're holding the wine, making a bracha over a mitzvah, which is the other bracha, the bracha of Havdalah. Right? Because you say more than once, Baruch Atah Hashem, you make more than one bracha when you're holding that cup. Once on Besamim, once on the candle, once on the hagafen, and once on the Havdalah. Yeah. So of those four, the bracha of Havdalah is the mitzvah bracha. The bracha B'Yei Pri Hagafen is actually a bracha of enjoying a cup of wine. Now, the first logic is like you're saying, hey, Havdalah is a separate entity, give it its own due, make a bracha hagafen. The other logic says, well, hold on a second. The bracha hagafen is not a bracha over a mitzvah. It's a bracha over enjoying a cup of wine. You already began to enjoy a cup of wine. You already made a bracha thanking Hashem for enjoying a cup of wine. Why are you doing it again? That's the other rationale. Follow? So even though we combine these things together, we do it all in one, they're actually different functions. And the bracha hagafen is simply because you're enjoying a cup of wine. Follow? So that becomes the primary opinion, which is why if you make a goal in the middle of your meal, you don't make a hagafen, because that bracha hagafen, isolated from the other brachas, is simply because you're enjoying a cup of wine, and you've already been enjoying a cup of wine.
Only if you had an intent to drink the wine after.
Well, when you make a hagafen at the beginning of your meal, it covers all the wine in your meal, assuming you know you're going to be drinking wine in your meal, unless a new higher level of wine comes in, like we discussed another time. Right?
How do you?
Yeah.
you need to drink wine for Havdalah?
Okay, so we're going to learn the Gemara later.
That would be the other opinion.
No, we're going to learn we're going to learn the Gemara later. That our sages ordained that certain mitzvahs be recited over wine to give it like a higher, like to give it more honor. Like for example, when you're doing a wedding, you make brachas.
That doesn't transform.
But you hold a cup of wine during you hold a cup of wine during those brachas. When you do a bris, you hold a cup of wine during those brachas.
Elevates the mitzvah.
Exactly, it's a way of like giving honor to the mitzvah that you hold a cup of wine as you recite that blessing.
It doesn't make that blessing a mitzvah blessing.
But the bracha hagafen still remains because you're enjoying a cup of wine. Right? So here you're making Havdalah over a cup of wine, but not actually making a bracha on the wine because you've already did so.
Right, when you're on the opinion that it's a blessing for enjoyment.
It definitely is a bracha for enjoyment,
Definitely.
which is why this is the primary opinion. There's another opinion which says that this cup of wine has been like extracted from your meal because it's associated with this mitzvah, not associated with your meal, and therefore it deserves its own bracha hagafen. But that's the anomaly opinion, because you're giving a bracha of enjoyment the status of mitzvah, when really it's just a bracha over enjoying a cup of wine. It's a birchas hanen, and it's a bracha of enjoying wine. Yeah, is it clear?
No, because Havdalah is different.
Hold on a second. You're allowed to, if you like one opinion over the other, that's okay. But you still have to understand the other, right? So as long as you understand the other,
I can understand.
Okay, good. That's it. So, in other words, detach hagafen from the Havdalah ceremony, because Havdalah is over Shabbos and hagafen is always over wine, and wine you're already drinking.
It has compound elements, the Havdalah ceremony.
Correct.
You're saying the wine is not really part of the mitzvah.
The summum is also not part. That's right. The summum is also the bracha of the summum is also a hanen, because you're enjoying the smell. So you make a bracha before you enjoy smell. Why are you smelling? You're smelling something because your neshama is sad and you want to revive your neshama. But the bracha you're making is not part of the mitzvah per se. It's because you're thanking Hashem for smelling a good smell.
If you did that during
on a Tuesday, you'd also have to make a bracha of summum.
Before Shabbos came out, you smelled some fragrance and you did this and
you still have to do it again on Motzei Shabbos. Yeah, so that's a discussed elsewhere. Yes, if you make Havdalah early, okay, we'll get to that. But yes, that is a good point. You're on target because really, it's not a mitzvah of the Havdalah. It's being done together, but it's a mitzvah.
Right, like the wine. So
like the wine.
Why would you have to repeat the
exactly
if you did it?
But it's a different day.
Sorry.
It's a different day.
So
it means that if I drank Saturday, Friday night, I made the bracha over the wine. Then Saturday morning you drink the wine.
That's not one sitting. If it's in one sitting, you don't have to make a new bracha, even if the day happens to transition.
So once you get up, it's over.
So that's what we discussed last time. When you leave the room, does it end your meal or not end your meal? Right? But the day changing doesn't end your meal, so long as it's one sitting, halachically speaking.
What we learned in Kiddush. When
that's
Kiddush
right.
arrives on their Shabbos.
Exactly right.
We cover the bread. We
make Kiddush and keep on going because your meal. That's right. Your meal didn't change.
This is all an outcrop of this whole discussion.
Correct. Okay. So you mentioned yesterday davening. That's what we're going to get to today. The davening matter business, right? Okay. So I mentioned yesterday that in theory, if you're having this farbrengen on Shabbos afternoon, right? You started when you're allowed to before the sunset, and let's say you wash, so you're covered by all opinions, and your meal continues. So Shabbos never ended because your meal, by your designating your meal and continuing to eat your meal,
it overflows.
If your Shabbos overflows with your meal into the Saturday night, and if we can keep on going, it's only if you want to make Havdalah in the middle, as we discussed yesterday. But you're not doing that. You're not breaking with Havdalah. You're keeping Shabbos, so you're in Shabbos mode, which means you cannot do any work. That means when you come to the benching, you're going to be saying Ritzei, which is a Shabbos insert, because you're extending Shabbos with your meal.
Right.
Good. So let's say you're 10 people around the room at this farbrengen, and you're going to all daven ma'ariv together at the end of the meal. That's perfectly fine. So what you do is, at the end of the farbrengen, you'd all bench, get up, daven ma'ariv with a minyan, and make Havdalah. Very nice. All perfectly fine. And that would actually be the best case scenario, because I think Jacob mentioned this yesterday, which is an important point, that there's this principle that as soon as an obligation hits you, you have to do the obligation. So there's an obligation for ma'ariv also on you, right? Okay, so you're extending Shabbos, so your obligation for ma'ariv didn't come yet because you're extending Shabbos. Especially in this case where I'm describing here, where you have 10 people around the room, we're all reminding each other that we're going to daven with a minyan together, so there isn't concern that we might forget it. Right? That would be the best case scenario. Okay, but let's say that's not the case. And I'm in the middle of my meal. So let's say 3 of us are having a farbrengen, let's just say 3 of us are having, and we're continuing our meal, no problem. We're extending Shabbos into Saturday night. But we decide we want to go daven with the minyan. We're going to pause our farbrengen, go daven with the minyan, because we want to catch Baruch Hu and be part of the minyan ma'ariv, and then come back to our meal. A-okay. We already learned earlier that benching, that davening doesn't constitute a break in your meal, right? We learned that already when we discussed the laws of leaving a room. We learned that davening doesn't constitute an ending in your meal. So no problem. The 3 of us will get up, go daven with the minyan, come back and continue with farbrengen. But now, what did our ma'ariv just do?
You don't have to leave.
Let's say you just leave someone behind, or let's say we can see the room, whatever the conditions are to continue our meal going. But the point is that the ma'ariv and the davening ma'ariv, well, let's say we didn't even leave the room. We stayed right there. We just stood with the ma'ariv with the minyan and sat back down. We didn't go to a different room.
We left the meal.
We're right there. We're staying there. We know we're continuing. We already discussed earlier in a different.
You're going out.
Sorry?
You're going out to do
Let's just assume we're not going out, okay? Even if you were going out, not necessarily does it end your meal, because we discussed that if you have in mind, you're going to come back, it doesn't necessarily, or if you left someone behind. There were different caveats we learned in the previous set of laws of how your meal can continue even if you're davening in the middle. But let's just assume when you leave the room. The minyan's right here. So we daven with the minyan at the table that we're going to be eating. The table's still set. We can daven ma'ariv and we continue our meal after. Okay, so our meal didn't stop. But what happened to our Shabbos? Did Shabbos stop or not?
It did, because it is an insert of Havdalah
You're splitting the day.
in my
So that's right. So now we're learning. Yesterday we learned that a person in the middle of his meal makes Havdalah and that ends his Shabbos, although his meal continued. Now we're talking about someone who ends Shabbos mid-meal, not by making Havdalah, but by davening ma'ariv. That's going to be the law we're learning right now. Okay, so halacha hey, halacha number 5. I don't know whatever page that is. No page number, but it says in the top. Sorry.
Parak 5.
Yeah, 5. It's the big 5 there. Okay. So in his spalal toichasuda,
Page 5.
yeah, in his spalal toichasuda, if you daven ma'ariv mid-meal, okay, chalalav chayvus havdalah. Now that you made daven ma'ariv, you've ended your Shabbos, although your meal's not over, so you can continue eating. But because your Shabbos ended, you've now invited the obligation of making Havdalah on a cup. And therefore, we already learned that once your obligation for Havdalah arrives, you may not eat until you have Havdalah. So pause your meal until you make Havdalah. And therefore, he says, it's forbidden to him to return to his meal until he first makes Havdalah over the cup. And now he's back to the question we learned yesterday: should he be making a bracha hagafen or not? And that'll depend. If he made a hagafen earlier in the meal, no hagafen in his Havdalah. If he's making Havdalah on beer, then his hamoitzi covered the beer.
No, it's another day.
But still the same meal, right? Now, now here's follow that so far.
No, I don't understand. He did Mara,
Yes, and that ended his Shabbos.
so he can't then go continue his meal
Until he makes Havdalah. No, he can't do that. Because once the obligation of Havdalah arrives, you have to make Havdalah. The only reason why you weren't making Havdalah mid-meal is because your meal extended your Shabbos and if the Havdalah obligation didn't come yet. But when you daven ma'ariv and you ended Shabbos, obligation for Havdalah has set upon you. And therefore you may not eat until you make Havdalah.
What about the people who went into nightfall, who were eating their meal that started before?
So their Shabbos, the Havdalah obligation never came upon them because their meal extended Shabbos. Their meal extended Shabbos though. So Shabbos isn't over. Their meal extended Shabbos. Shabbos isn't over yet.
Theoretically time to do Havdalah, but because
Correct.
their meal extended Shabbos, that it was postponed.
That's right, the Havdalah is postponed. But you daven ma'ariv now.
Once you daven ma'ariv, it's no longer postponed.
Correct. Once you daven ma'ariv, you've effectively ended your Shabbos.
That's the difference.
So now the Havdalah obligations upon you. You may not eat until you go to do Havdalah. So you daven ma'ariv, make Havdalah, and then keep on going from your meal.
And also, you sort of did Havdalah already in your ma'ariv prayer.
That's what caused you to bring upon the obligation for Havdalah on a cup.
Right.
Because you made the declaration in ma'ariv of ending your day, right? We add that insert on Saturday night to end your Shabbos. So in your ma'ariv, you ended Shabbos. And because you ended Shabbos, you've invited the obligation to make Havdalah on a cup. And therefore, you may not continue your meal until you do Havdalah, but you can continue your meal after, no problem. And now it's no longer a Shabbos meal.
So the
Even though
question
you're in
then
another
is,
day.
Yeah, there's no problem with having a meal that spans 2 days, right? That's not a
so
problem.
the question is, therefore, if you started your meal with a glass with wine, do you make the bracha of hagafen in your Havdalah?
Back to the same
Back
question
to
you
the
had
same
yesterday,
question as before.
which is the answer is if you
That's
had
the
drank wine
primary
before,
is you don't.
the primary is you should wait till after you bench. But in this case, you're not doing that because you want to continue your meal, whatever you want to continue your farbrengen, whatever you're doing. You have it clear?
Yeah.
Okay, it's all kinds of hypotheticals. Now it continues another hypothetical. Even if you daven Ma'ariv early. Now I know this is going to throw a little wrench, but there is an obligation. There are scenarios, and there is the possibility of a person in davening Ma'ariv before Shabbos is even over. Just like.
You mean that 1.25 halakhic hours? No, that's for the week.
Just like on a regular weekday, there are some shuls where they daven Ma'ariv early, yeah, and they remember to say Shema later.
Right.
Right.
Like we do on Friday night.
Like we do on Friday night when we take Shabbos in early. So under certain circumstances, a person may do so even on Shabbat, on Saturday afternoon, Shabbos. So he davened Ma'ariv early, which means he actually didn't end his Shabbos yet, because the Shabbos is not going to be over until the time has actually come for Shabbos to be over, even though he davened Ma'ariv early.
How does he make the Havdalah prayer in the Ma'ariv?
You make the declaration thanking Hashem to separate between Shabbos and Yom Tov, between Shabbos and weekday, even though Shabbos isn't over yet. You're just thanking Hashem for making that separation.
He does malacha after that?
No, God forbid, not until Shabbos, not until the sun sets, not until Shabbos is over.
So it's almost like you're also postponing Havdalah in that case as well, right?
Well, you, what do you mean?
Because Shabbos is not technically over.
Shabbos isn't technically over, but you have made a declaration which separates weekday, Shabbos from weekday. Even though Shabbos isn't technically over. You're still not allowed to do malacha because Shabbos isn't ended yet, but you made the declaration to separate between Shabbos and weekday, which means you pre-made a declaration. Exactly. It's like
then I guess you would be obligated to do Havdalah.
Correct. That's the point. It's like you pre-made a declaration. In other words, it's almost like you're announcing in your Havdalah that in a half an hour from now, Shabbos is over. And therefore, you've invited the obligation for Havdalah.
You've already invited the obligation.
Exactly. And therefore, the obligation for Havdalah comes upon him right away. And therefore, he may not eat anything except for water until he makes a Havdalah. Now, if you look at footnote 30, he says like this. See subsection 1 compared to section 271.12 with regard to Kiddush. Okay. Pri Megadim states that after reciting Havdalah, the person may return to his meal without any additional blessing. Because his Havdalah ended Shabbos, but didn't end his meal. And he goes back without making any bracha. The bracha he made before continue. Even though you davened Ma'ariv in the middle, and you benched and you made Havdalah in the middle, but your meal continues. It's an awkward kind of thing, but this is a halacha.
No, you didn't. You said you bench. You didn't bench.
No, I'm sorry, you didn't bench. No.
Oh, okay.
You made Havdalah in the middle and you davened Ma'ariv in the middle, and yet your meal isn't over, so you can continue eating without making any bracha. No shahakol, no hagafa, nothing. It's a funny thing, but this is the halacha.
It seems like the common theme, even in all these different scenarios, is that your meal is not
correct.
It continues, whether you transferred the day or.
That's right. Your meal can straddle 2 days. Your meal can straddle 2 days. That's the point. So, actually, but your meal has actually two options. Either your meal extends your Shabbos if you don't make any Havdalah and you started early enough, or you started in Shabbos time, or it straddles 2 days if you make Havdalah or daven Ma'ariv mid-meal. And if you daven Ma'ariv, then you must make Havdalah mid-meal, because once you daven Ma'ariv, the Havdalah arrives, and once the Havdalah arrives, you may not eat until you make Havdalah.
So if you're for ring with 20 guys, and you decide that you're going to do Ma'ariv, okay? After you continue your meal.
Yeah, you're going to do Ma'ariv when you're done.
Day, and then you want to do Ma'ariv.
Yeah.
So you do Ma'ariv.
Yeah.
But you only have 4 guys left. Can you still do Ma'ariv without a minion?
Yeah, you can do Ma'ariv without a minion. You're obligated to do Ma'ariv without a minion. In best case, you should do with a minion. But of course, even if you miss a minion, yeah, you daven Ma'ariv. Yeah, you daven Ma'ariv because you don't have the obligation. You don't have the ability to make a minion. Yeah, if it doesn't happen, you still do Ma'ariv. Okay.
You have to do Havdalah.
Sorry.
You do Havdalah.
That's right. You do Ma'ariv, Havdalah, and then done.
Your meal with no new bracha.
Yeah, if you're continuing your meal.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, halacha vav. Now we're going back to the normal scenario, which is where you began your meal early enough, and you're not going to make Havdalah in the middle of your meal. You're going to use your meal to extend your Shabbos, right? So what's the order of events when you're done your meal? You have 3 things on you. You have benching, Ma'ariv, and Havdalah. What's your order? You bench first because you're ending your meal. Then you daven Ma'ariv, and then you make Havdalah, right? Now, here's the question. You may not eat or drink until you make Havdalah. Once you bench, your meal is over. What do you do with the cup of wine you held for benching? So that's what we're addressing now. It's all these.
Seems complicated.
Okay, ready?
Well, that's not for enjoyment, right? That's, maybe not.
We'll see.
All right.
Okay. Kishu yoshev oichel, you're right, but let's just see. It's 6. Kishu yoshev oichel, when the person's sitting and eating, and he began before Shabbos is out. He began before Ben Hashmoshes, before that sunset, so it's totally perfect. And therefore he's not required to stop his meal. And to make Avdallah before he benches. He doesn't have to do that because he's using his meal to extend Shabbos.
Mm-hmm.
So when he's done his meal, an hour or two after Shabbos, whatever it is, he benches. So it says the Alter Rebbe, he should drink from the cup over which he recited the Berch Hamazon, even though he hasn't done benching yet, even though he hasn't done Avdallah yet.
No.
Right? Why is that? The fish shekoisha bracha, shekoisha Berch Hamazon, because the cup of Berch Hamazon, who gamkein mechlal hasuda, is part of your meal. Even though technically the wine you drink comes after your meal is over because it comes after benching, but it's really there because of your meal. And therefore, you have that permission, just like you're allowed to eat your meal up until you bench, even though Shabbos is over, that extends to everything about your meal, including the wine that you drink after Berch Hamazon.
So you don't have to make the bracha.
Hagafen, you do make hagafen. If you're holding a cup of, just in general, if you're holding a cup of wine during benching, you're leading the benching, and after benching, you drink that cup, you make hagafen first.
But if it's part of your meal, then why would you?
It's part of your meal. Good question.
And also, you're making that wine because it's an elevation of, right?
But he doesn't say that though.
He doesn't say that.
He didn't say that though. Yeah.
I'm going against what I said earlier, but
He doesn't say that though. He doesn't say the reason is because it's a mitzvah to do so. He doesn't say that.
it's
But
part of your meal.
We will see in a second where that mitzvah element is relevant. In a second, we'll see that. But he's saying it's, in other words, that cup of wine comes as a result of your meal, and therefore you're allowed to drink it. Just like the meal is allowed to go till now, so is the wine, which ends your meal, also allowed to be drunk now.
But you're not making a bracha on the other one. Here you have to make a bracha.
Yes, that's true.
Wine is different though, right?
But nonetheless,
So
it's there as it's being brought out by your meal, and thus it's given the same leniency as your meal,
I think
and they're allowed to eat, drink, allowed to drink it.
wine is also considered like a separate course too sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, well, that's
No, but let's put it this way: why are you drinking this cup of wine? Not because necessarily you're enjoying yourself, but because your meal said you should do it.
right,
because
you're
you're
full at that point. and-
You're done your meal. You're making a motzei. You make your benching, but it's your meal that said, "Hey, you got to drink another cup." And therefore, the same way the meal was allowed to go till now, so is that extra cup allowed to be drunk now.
Does seem more like a mitzvah.
Sorry,
You've already drank 3 cups.
3. What do you mean?
Well,
However many you want,
yeah, 5.
whatever it is, right? But the point is, you're doing it because you're always you always make a guffin at the end of your meal. The cup of wine you drink as a result of benching, which
It's not a hanenin kind of.
it is hanenin.
That's separate in itself.
Sorry,
So that's separate in itself.
in which scenario?
You're making a compliment.
And then just explain. I make sure you get it clear. In which scenario?
I'm sitting down and I'm eating.
A regular day.
I made on a Friday night. Okay.
You're invoking specifically Shabbos, or you just mean a meal in general?
Okay.
A Tuesday, whatever, regular meal in general. Okay, yeah.
Mixing up Shabbos with it.
Yeah. So let's say you have a meal a regular day.
Yeah.
You wash.
Yeah.
You bench,
You
and
bench.
during your benching, you hold a cup of wine. When you're done, right? Because you're doing benching over the cup.
But you've been drinking. First cup of wine, you
Yeah,
made a bracha.
No problem. You've been drinking.
Then you've been drinking and drinking and drinking.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're doing.
Yes, we learned down in the Gemara, right? We learned down in the Gemara the story with Rav who went to travel, and after benching, he made another bracha on Agafen. Yeah.
Okay.
Even though that cup of wine is a result of your meal, because it comes after benching, a new Agafen.
So
that one.
why do you have to make it there and not Havdalah, which is separate?
Because Abdullah didn't come after benching.
It did.
No, it didn't. In yesterday's scenario, Abdullah came mid-meal, didn't bench yet. If it comes after benching, certainly you're making a new Hagafen. But yesterday, we were talking about where you made Havdalah mid-meal. So that's why it's no Hagafen. If it came after benching, which like this cup of wine does,
Then you have to do it.
no Hagafen, that's right. But the chiddush here is, the novelty here is, that because it comes of your, because it became part of your meal, therefore, even though you haven't made Havdalah yet, you're allowed to drink that wine.
What if
Because
you
it came as a
drink-
result of your meal, which was allowed to be extended into after Shabbos.
Okay, so
What
it's
if-
only after you ended your meal.
Correct. Yeah, what do you say?
You walk out drunk.
no one has to drink that much wine during your meal. Yeah, what do you say?
No, I forget. No.
Okay.
You can actually walk out drunk.
It depends how much you drink, yeah.
That's what God doesn't want you to do.
Especially for Kohanim.
Yeah. You don't have. It doesn't have to be the highest alcohol content. No one has to drink more than 1 cup throughout the meal. It could be grape juice. Okay, but says Alter Rebbe, this is only lemisha nizer la'olam levarach b'chsamazon al kais. This is only if you always hold a cup of wine when you bench. There is a view which says that every single time you bench, you hold a cup of wine, just like you do by Kiddush, irrespective of whether you have a minion or you're sitting alone. So you're sitting alone eating supper on Tuesday and you washed. There's an opinion which says you have to hold a cup of wine. So someone who does that, holds a cup of wine every single time he benches, then for him, when he benches on Saturday night and he holds a cup of wine, because he always has a cup of wine with his benching, that cup of wine he may drink even though he didn't do Havdalah yet because it's coming as an extension of your meal. But for the rest of us who don't always hold a cup of wine when we bench, we only do so on special occasions or when we have a minion or whatever. We don't always, not every single time I bench do I hold a cup of wine. Right? If I have lunch on a Tuesday, I'm not holding a cup of wine when I bench. There are those who do. But for the rest of us who don't, and this is because we rely on the opinion which says that benching does not have to have a cup. Right? So then then he is forbidden from drinking a cup of wine after benching before Havdalah.
So he doesn't make the bracha.
Nothing. Don't hold a cup of wine during benching. Or maybe you can hold a cup of wine without drinking it after. Maybe.
How does he stand up drinking with Philip?
I think he would do this.
Sorry? No, he's not drinking at all. It's not that many cups of wine. You're adding 5 cups to the meal. You don't have to have 5 cups during your meal. You could, in theory, do that. You couldn't, in theory, do that.
You could? You couldn't.
Sorry?
Saying on those rare occasions where they would have to, recite the blessing over a cup of wine, since it's not a regular occasion for them, on Saturday night they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't fall.
It's a good question. There is such a. Okay, let me explain this question. So we're talking about someone who, like us, we don't hold a cup of wine every time we bench. Right? Now it's Saturday night. I started my meal before Shabbos is over, which means I'm allowed to extend into Saturday night. Good. I come to benching. Now, once I come to benching, it's my meal brought Shabbos, and that's why I was allowed to eat. When I end my meal, I'm no longer allowed to eat until Havdalah. Right? Now, can I hold a cup of wine during benching, considering that I may not drink it after benching is over? If I always hold a cup of wine during benching, then we said before, you're allowed to do that now and drink it after you're benching because it's still part of your meal, just like you do every other meal, even though you're making a new hagafen. But if, like me, I don't always hold a cup of wine during benching, like most of us, I imagine all of us actually, we don't always hold a cup of wine during benching. Now, she was asking, maybe in this case, he can hold a cup of wine during benching, but not actually drink it when it's over. And do so just for the sake of holding the cup during benching. So that this blessing is recited over a cup of wine. The answer to that question is, doesn't say so here, but it would seem to me the answer is yes, you may do so. You may do so. And someone else should probably drink it. Or maybe, we'll see maybe in a second, maybe you could even keep it for your Havdalah. Use that same cup for Havdalah later.
Yeah.
And drink it then. There's that possibility as well. Let's look at Halacha Zayin. We clear?
You see while he's doing Havdalah if he's not too much?
You're obsessing over someone having too much. You don't have to have so much.
It's
only one if he does.
For Rengi, you never know what's going
to. Yeah, a person should stand.
Scenario,
or give it to someone else. Give it to someone else, make Havdalah if you're inebriated to that extent.
That person made hagafen during his meal. And then he held this wine for Havdalah.
But 1 second, first he has to bench.
Well, he benched.
With this cup of wine? He benched, yes. No. Let's just say he benched, okay?
Okay, he benched. So therefore
when it comes to Havdalah, it's a hagafen.
Use that cup of wine for Havdalah.
Yeah.
Would he make the
hagafen? Absolutely. Because he benched. Absolutely. So let's see Halacha Zayin. Bein mi shemuter lo lishtos mimenu ubein mi she'asar lo lishtos mimenu kodem Havdalah. Whether you're the kind of person who is allowed to drink that cup of wine that you held for benching, because you always do so, or whether you're the kind of person who may not drink from the cup of wine that you made Havdalah over on Saturday night because you don't always do so, and now that your meal is over, you're not allowed to drink to Havdalah. Miyad koidim sheyishtem mimena. He may not make Havdalah on that cup right away before he drinks. We're not done. He should make Havdalah on another cup of wine, which means in this case he held one cup of wine during benching, put it down, filled up another one to make Havdalah. If he has an extra cup. Yeah, this is based on the principle of the Gemara not to combine mitzvahs. The benching is one independent holy mitzvah. Havdalah is an independent holy mitzvah. One should not combine two holy items onto one cup. If he has the capacity, he can afford it, and he has 2 cups of wine. Because we don't turn mitzvahs into bundles. So there's the answer to your question. You could hold a cup of wine during benching, and if you have a second cup, put that cup down and take another one for benching. If you don't have, but if I don't have another cup of wine, then you hold that cup during benching. You have to right away make Havdalah, which would mean before Ma'ariv.
You can't combine cups, but you can combine bracha.
No, in this case, the guy has no cup. He has no other cup. He says this is the one and only cup of wine he has.
Where you had a meal that extended, and you didn't bench. You set aside. You postponed your meal until after Havdalah. If you had wine and made a bracha of wine in that meal, you're able to. When you're doing Havdalah, you don't make a new bracha.
Because it's the middle of the meal.
No, the meal.
Yes.
So you are, in a sense, connecting or
no, not really. Because you're not holding one cup of wine for 2 different mitzvahs.
No, it's different wine. So it's
correct.
Different wine,
correct.
But it's the same
bracha. The hagafen is fine. That's the bechas and
No, for sure. And
right,
it is.
Yes.
I'm just saying there's like elements of combining or elements of not combining.
The combining is only vis-a-vis the bracha hagafen because but not for the mitzvah.
Different cup, but not for the bracha.
That's right. The hagafen can be combined because you're thanking Hashem for enjoying, and you're enjoying whether you're enjoying here or there. But you're not combining the mitzvahs over one cup.
No, not combining the mitzvahs.
There's the point. That's right. So here in this scenario, where he only has 1 cup of wine, it's Saturday night, and he extended his meal late. So he holds 1 cup of wine for benching and doesn't even put it down. He goes right to making Havdalah and then drinks it. Because you don't want to postpone your drinking from the mitzvah upon which you made the hagafen. And if you made the hagafen on benching and you put it down and then an hour later you make Havdalah, you're making this cup of wine that you benched overweight.
Can he go back to that cup and not say a bracha because he made it in Havdalah? Because it's also for Hanen.
Say it again.
He benched. He didn't say the bracha because he benched.
Put it down, didn't make hagafen.
Made a new cup. Did Havdalah.
Yeah.
Now he wants to drink that cup.
That original cup. No new hagafen. No.
No. Right.
No. Yeah. So here he's talking about like this. Here, where a person only has 1 cup of wine, doesn't have a second one. Doesn't have a second cup. He only has 1.
Then he's allowed.
So he holds it during benching. Says the Alter Rebbe, you have to right away go to Havdalah if you're going to use that cup for Havdalah, not to delay your drinking of the wine too far away from benching upon which you made the first mitzvah on that cup.
Can we go through a scenario? It's a Saturday night.
Before I go to that, is it clear?
In that case,
yeah. I'll give him 1 second. Yeah.
But okay, so he says, "Break off and drink."
He doesn't drink yet. Doesn't make a hagafen yet. He finishes benching and goes right to Hine Kel Yishuasi, right to Havdalah.
Oh, because he wants to use that.
He wants to use 1 cup for 2 mitzvahs because he only can afford 1 cup. He has no more cups left, wine left in his house.
They give an allowance for combining.
Correct, because you have nothing left. We looked at the Gemara, right?
Right.
We looked at the Gemara that you best case 2 cups of wine for 1 cup for each mitzvah. But if you only have 1 cup for 2 mitzvahs. So in this case, says the Alter Rebbe, you should do it right away. Well, don't push off Havdalah and the drink until later. If you're of the view that benching requires a cup, you have to drink that cup right away. And therefore, if you're going to use that also for Havdalah, go straight to your Havdalah from your benching. Not to extend, not to distance yourself from the mitzvah upon which you recited the cup from the drinking. And therefore, do it right away. Again, only if you only have 1 cup of Havdalah in the house.
Last resort.
Yeah.
I'd like to
Yeah.
go through a scenario.
Okay, go to scenario.
It's a Saturday.
And then we'll close at that and we'll continue tomorrow, even though there's a parenthesis here. But that's gonna invoke another confusion. So we'll write that tomorrow.
Let's say it's 4 o'clock on a Saturday. Or
It's-
5 o'clock on a Saturday.
Yeah, it's before sunset on Saturday afternoon. Yeah,
It's 5 o'clock.
whatever. Yeah,
Or some,
before sunset is the point. Yeah.
We come in here
Yep.
and we start to eat.
Okay.
Right? And it's mincha time.
Yeah. Oh, it's before mincha. Okay.
Do we stop for mincha?
Yeah.
And then we continue eating?
Meaning, in theory, yeah.
In theory, we continue eating?
Yeah.
Then what happens to shal shurus?
You're saying combining your shalashut. Oh, you're saying like this. You're asking a separate question, which is you're required in halacha to have 3 meals on Shabbos. And if you had, let's say, if your lunch basically extended till after mincha,
It's going to extend right through the night.
right? So, but it's your lunch, which means it's only your second meal on Shabbos.
second meal,
You started you did one Saturday night, one Friday night, and now you're doing one Saturday day, and that one Saturday meal is extending all the way to Motzei Shabbos.
Right.
Okay. In theory, you should bench and start again, because halach you have to have 3 meals. So in theory, you should bench, mincha, and then start again if you want to do so.
Yeah.
But that's nothing to do with the issue. It's a related issue to this, because over there you have to make sure you're actually having 3 meals. So this comes up, for example, when Erev Pesach is Shabbos, and you have to stop eating chametz by 10:30 in the morning.
Oh, we had that about 2 years
Yeah,
ago.
2 years ago, right? And you have to have 3 meals.
11 o'clock
One's
they're doing-
one Friday night, there's 2 Shabbos day, but you cannot have a meal after 10:30 in the morning because you're not allowed to eat chametz yet. You're not allowed to have chametz, and you're not allowed to eat matzah yet. So what we did was, you'll remember,
Yeah,
is
11 in the
we
morning.
davened like 7 o'clock in the morning, and at 10 o'clock we make kiddush, washed, ate something as our meal, benched, washed again for our shal shidduchs. For those who are inclined to washing during shal
Pita
shidduchs,
bread.
pita bread, benched, and then did it again. So because of the issue of you have to have 3 meals, you shouldn't extend your lunch meal all the way to the end.
Right.
You should extend only your 3rd meal to the end. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to use one more scenario, but let's just recap what we did today so far, just so we have the points clear. Point 1 is that if you end Shabbos mid-meal, you must make Havdalah. Which means if in the middle of your meal you daven Ma'ariv, you have to make Havdalah before you continue your meal. Because it's mid-meal, as per the primary opinion, no bracha agafen on your Havdalah, considering you already drank wine earlier. Yeah. Now, issue number 2 is thank you. Issue number 2 is if I didn't make Havdalah mid-meal, I continued my meal into Saturday night, and I benched as I'm supposed to, and then I'm going to make Havdalah after as I'm supposed to. What do I do with the cup of wine over which I benched? Because once I bench, my meal is over, and once my meal is over, I have to make Havdalah right away. So how am I allowed to drink that wine? 3 scenarios. Scenario A is I'm a person who always holds a cup of wine during benching. If I'm that kind of guy, make a guff and drink the wine even though it's before you have Havdalah, because you always do it during your meal. It's part of your meal. Option 2 is I'm not that kind of guy. I don't always make Havdalah. I don't always hold a cup of wine during Havdalah. In this case, if I did hold a cup of wine during Havdalah, no problem. You can do that, but don't drink. And then use another cup for Havdalah. Option 3 is I only have 1 cup in the house. Then I hold a cup of wine for benching, go straight to Havdalah and drink it. That's a recap of today. We're going to introduce one more element, God willing, tomorrow before we get back to the Gemara.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's always best just to follow the pattern of the siddur. You don't get into any complex issues. That's why the siddur is structured the way it is, to cover all these different details, support why the siddur is built exactly as it is, so that you never run into these problems. But when they do, one requires another law. Okay, have a wonderful day.
Okay.